In chapter 15, verse 11. Yatanto yoginaschainam pasyantatmanyavasthitam yatanto piyakritatmano nainam pashyanta chetasaha. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. What can they see all clearly? How living entity, what sort of body he enjoys, modes of nature, all this he can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. So whose minds are not developed, and not materially developed, but spiritually developed, who are not situated in self-realization, they cannot see what is taking place. They just see everything from material vision. They cannot really understand what's going on. And so this also applies to us practicing devotees. Many times we kind of fall down to material vision. We forget that I am not the body, I am spirit soul, and I'm the shelter of Krishna. Krishna is protecting me. Everything is Krishna's mercy. Now these things we forget, and then we also don't seem to understand what is going on in our life. We become bewildered. Oh, my life is like this. I have so many problems. This is happening, that is happening. Now, in all this analysis of our own life situation, where is Krishna? If we are analyzing our situation without Krishna, then it's not different from people outside, because they don't even know about Krishna's presence. Nor do they understand Krishna's energies, how it works, what energy is acting, nothing. They don't understand any of this. But as practicing devotees, we should also not forget these things. We should not fall into ignorance. And that is why I repeatedly emphasize this need for good association. Because when we fall into ignorance, we need good association to pull us out. Purport. There are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual self-realization, but one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yoginaha is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis and there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they're actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. They are called yatanto api akritatmanaha. Even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, they are not self-realized. Such people cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. So till we come to the stage of engaging in pure devotional service, we will also be somewhat bewildered by happenings in our life. So we should associate with pure devotees, we should hear from pure devotees, we should practice pure devotional service. Then we can see things as they are. So this is very, very important. Otherwise, our vision will be non-different from material vision. 15.12. Yadaditya tejo jagad bhasayate khilam yachandramsi yachagno tattejo vidhi mamakam. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. The splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. So this is Purushottama Yoga. How we can understand Purushottama, Krishna, through yoga. So when we see the sun, we can understand that is Krishna. When we see the moon, that is Krishna. We see the fire, that is Krishna. The unintelligent cannot understand how things are taking place, but one can begin to be established in knowledge by understanding what the Lord explains here. Everyone sees the sun, moon, fire, and electricity. One should simply try to understand the splendor of the sun, splendor of the moon, splendor of electricity or fire are coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In such a conception of life, the beginning of Krishna consciousness, lies a great deal of advancement for the conditioned soul in this material world. The living entities are essentially the parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. And he's giving here with the hint how they can come back to Godhead, back to home. From this verse, we can understand that the sun is illuminating the whole solar system. There are different universes and solar systems, and there are different suns, moons, and planets also. But in each universe, there is only one sun. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the moon is one of the stars. Nakshatranam aham shashi. Sunlight is due to spiritual effulgence in the spiritual sky of the Supreme Lord. With the rise of the sun, the activities of human beings are set up. They set fire to prepare their foodstuff, they set fire to start the factories, etc. So many things are done with the help of fire. Therefore, sunrise, fire, and moonlight are so pleasing to the living entities. Without their help, no living entity can live. So, if one can understand that the light and splendor of the sun, moon, and fire are emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, then one's Krishna consciousness will begin. By the moonshine, the vegetables are nourished. The moonshine is so pleasing that people can easily understand that they are living by the mercy of Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Without his mercy, there cannot be sun. Without his mercy, there cannot be moon. And without his mercy, there cannot be fire. And without the help of sun, moon, and fire, no one can live. These are some thoughts of to provoke Krishna consciousness in the conditioned soul. So Prabhupada, Krishna is saying here, now those who don't have, whose minds are not developed, they can't understand things. Now how do they develop their mind? By seeing Krishna in the sun, moon, and fire. And the rest of the verses that Krishna is now going to say, which helps those people with undeveloped minds to start thinking about Krishna. So that is why Prabhupada is saying this is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. Thoughts to provoke Krishna consciousness. Gama vishyacha bhutani dharayamyaham pushnami chaushadhi sarva somo bhutva rasatmaka. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. It is understood that all the planets are floating in the air only by the energy of the Lord. This is the energy of gravitation. The Lord enters into every atom, every planet, and every living being. That is discussed in Brahma Samhita. It is said there that one plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, enters into the planets, the universe, the living entity, and even into the atom. So due to his entrance, everything is appropriately manifested. When the spirit soul is there, a living man can float on the water. But when the living spark is out of the body and the body is dead, the body sinks. Of course, when it is decomposed, it floats just like straw and other things. But as soon as the man is dead, he at once sinks in the water. Similarly, all these planets are floating in space, and this is due to the entrance of the Supreme Energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His energy is sustaining each planet, just like a handful of dust. If someone holds a handful of dust, there is no possibility of the dust falling. But if one throws it in the air, it will fall down. Similarly, these planets which are floating in the air are actually held in the fist of the universal form of the Supreme Lord. By his strength and energy, all moving and non-moving things stay in their place. It is said in Vedic hymns that because of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sun is shining and the planets are steadily moving. Were it not for him, all the planets would scatter like dust in air and perish. Similarly, it is due to the Supreme Personality of Godhead that the moon nourishes all vegetables. Due to the moon's influence, the vegetables become delicious. Without the moonshine, the vegetables can neither grow nor taste succulent. Human society is working, living comfortably, and enjoying food due to the supply from the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, mankind could not survive. The word rasatmaka is very significant. Everything becomes palatable by the agency of the Supreme Lord through the influence of the moon. Pretty straightforward purpose. If anybody has any questions, you can please ask. 14. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashitah Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyannam Chaturvidam. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. Actually, this is one amazing thing, right? Like we eat and we digest, we feel hungry, we again eat. We don't think that, even this digestion is mercy of the Supreme Lord. Uh, struggling with some digestive issues, and I realize how how without Krishna's mercy we cannot even digest food, nor do we like to eat, nor can we eat, nor can we digest. So literally without his presence we cannot live. But only when we go through difficult situations we'll understand and appreciate all this. According to Ayurvedic Shastra, we understand that there is fire in the stomach which digests all food sent there. When the fire is not blazing, there is no hunger. And when the fire is in order, we become hungry. Sometimes when the fire is not going nicely, treatment is required. In any case, this fire is representative of the Supreme Person of Godhead. Vedic mantras, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also confirm that the Supreme Lord or Brahman is situated in the form of fire within the stomach and is digesting all kinds of foodstuff. I am Agnir Vaishvanaro yo yam antah purushe ye nedam annam pachate. Therefore, since he is helping the digestion of all kinds of foodstuff, the living entity is not independent in the eating process. Unless the Supreme Lord helps him in digesting, there is no possibility of eating. He thus produces and digests foodstuff, and by his grace, we are enjoying life. So he produces and also helps us digest. Both. If he doesn't produce, we won't get food. Even if he produces, but we can't digest, then that also becomes useless. In Vedanta Sutra, this is also confirmed. Shabdadibhyonta pratisthanacha. The Lord is situated within sound and within the body, within the air and even within the stomach as the digestive force. There are four kinds of foodstuff. Some are drunk, some are chewed, some are licked, and some are sucked. And he is the digestive force for all of them. Very famous verse. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta smritirjnanam apohanam cha Vedeshta sarve rame vedyo vedanta krutpeda videva chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. The Supreme Lord is situated as Paramatma in everyone's heart. And it is from him that all activities are initiated. So this is very important to understand. So when we give up one body and take up another body, we forget everything. Okay, but this life is a continuation of past life. Now, who builds that connection? That connection is built by Paramatma. So he initiates our actions as as a continuation of the last life's activities. So he initiates us. The living entity forgets everything of his past life, but he has to act according to the direction of the Supreme Lord, who is the witness of to all his work. Therefore, he begins his work according to his past deeds. Required knowledge is supplied to him. We don't get that knowledge. We are supplied with that knowledge. And remembrance is given to him. And he forgets also about his past life. Thus, the Lord is not only all-pervading, he is also localized in every individual heart. He awards the different fruitive results. He is worshipable not only as the impersonal Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the localized Paramatma, but as the form of incarnation of the Vedas as well. Why? The Vedas give the right direction to people so that they can properly mold their lives and come back to Godhead, back to home. Vedas offer knowledge to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And Krishna in his incarnation as Vyasadeva. Krishna is saying, I am the compiler of Vedanta. He is the compiler of Vedanta as Vyasadeva. As Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedanta Sutra. The commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Vyasadeva in the Srimad Bhagavatam gives the real understanding of Vedanta Sutra. The Supreme Lord is so full that for the deliverance of the conditioned soul, he is the supplier and digester of foodstuff. the witness of his activity, giver of knowledge in the form of Vedas, and as the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, the teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. He is worshipable by the conditioned soul. Why? Because he is all good. He is all merciful. So he is doing all of these things to help us. And people say, why is he allowing us to rot in this material world? He is not allowing. If we had to rot in this material world, he could have just simply not given us food, not given us strength to digest stuff, not be the witness of our activity, not enable us to pursue our dreams, nor the giver of knowledge. Then we would have rotten here, but we are actually not. It's just that we are making a choice to ignore Krishna. But he's so mercifully providing for everything. Antapravishta Shastra Jananam. The living entity forgets as soon as he quits his present body, but he begins his work again, initiated by the Supreme Lord. Although he forgets, the Lord gives him the intelligence to renew his work where he ended his last life. So not only does the living entity enjoy or suffer in the world according to the dictation from the Supreme Lord situated locally in the heart, but he receives the opportunity to understand the Vedas from him. If one is serious about understanding the Vedic knowledge, then Krishna gives the required intelligence. Why does he present the Vedic knowledge for understanding? Because a living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. Individually means like every living entity has to understand, not like independent type. Every individual jiva has to understand. Vedic literature confirms this. Yoso sarver veder giyate. In all Vedic literature, beginning from the four Vedas, Vedanta Sutra, and the Upanishads and Puranas, the glories of the Supreme Lord are celebrated by performance of Vedic rituals, discussion of the Vedic philosophy, and worship of the Lord in devotional service. He is attained. Therefore, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna, because this is what the Vedas give. Karma Kanda, Gnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. That's what Prabhupada is saying. By this one can attain Krishna, so that is the purpose of the Vedas. The Vedas give us direction by which to understand Krishna and the process of realizing him. The ultimate goal is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedanta Sutra confirms this in the following words: Tattu Samanvayat. One can attain perfection in 3 stages. By understanding Vedic literature, one can understand his relationship with Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sambandha Gnana. By performing the different processes, one can approach him, Abhideya. And at the end, one can attain the supreme goal, who is no other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prayojana. In this verse, the purpose of the Vedas, the understanding of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas are clearly defined. So, which means we should understand Vedas are not giving us anything apart from Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, Gnana. Just that we don't understand it because it's not very directly given. It's a little bit indirect. So people lose their way. So we are so fortunate that we've come to the conclusion of Vedas, of all Puranas, of everything literally, is to this devotional service of Krishna. So we should feel very fortunate and make sure that we don't give up on this, right? Because of whatever busy material life, material problems, etc., etc., etc. And Krishna also says, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. So as Paramatma is really so dear, Bhoktaram Ignatapasam, Prabhupada says in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we're quoting this verse, saying that Paramatma is our friend because he's there with us all the time. And he's guiding us, but we just ignore. We ignore his guidance. And when people ignore his guidance, for such people, he stops giving advice. He just becomes Hanumantopadrishta. But for others, he's the well-wisher. He'll guide. Oh, you want to learn, you want to progress on spiritual path? Okay, go to this Guru. So Chaitya Guru. So he directs us to our Guru. And this is Paramatma. So he's so mercifully helping us to progress on the path back home, back to God. It's Krishna's special mercy on jivas. Okay. 16. Dvavimo purushau loke ksharaschakshara evacha kshara sarvani bhutani kutastokshara uchyate. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Infallible is Achyuta, or here Akshara, and fallible is Kshara or Chuta. Purport. As already explained, the Lord in his incarnation as Vyasadeva compiled the Vedanta Sutra. Here the Lord is giving in summary the contents of the Vedanta Sutra. He says that the living entities who are innumerable can be divided into two classes, the fallible and the infallible. The living entities are eternally separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Person of Godhead. When they are in contact with the material world, they are called Jiva Bhuta. The Sanskrit words given here, Kshara Sarvani Bhutani, mean that they are fallible. Those who are in oneness with the Supreme Person of Godhead, however, are called infallible. Now, what does this oneness mean? Oneness does not mean they have no individuality, but that there is no disunity. Prabhupada has used such a beautiful word, disunity. They're all agreeable to the purpose of creation. What is the purpose of creation? Is to rectify the jiva and make sure that he can go back to Godhead. That is the purpose of creation. Of course, in the spiritual world, there is no such thing as creation. But since the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in the Vedanta Sutra, is the source of all emanations, that conception is explained. According to the statement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, there are two classes of living entities. The Vedas give evidence of this, so there is no doubt about it. The living entities who are struggling in this world with the mind and five senses have their material bodies which are changing. As long as a living entity is conditioned, his body changes due to contact with matter. Like it, Prabhupada is saying this in later. Matter is changing, so the living entity appears to be changing. But in the spiritual world, the body is not made of matter, therefore there is no change. What kind of change? Material world, the living entity undergoes 6 changes: birth, growth, duration, reproduction, dwindling, and vanishing. Duration means staying for some time. These are the changes of the material body, but in the spiritual world, the body does not change. There is no old age, there is no birth, there is no death. There all exist in oneness, meaning this. There is no disunity, there is unity, unison. Kshara Sarvani Bhutani, any living entity who has come in contact with matter, beginning from the first created being Brahma down to a small ant, is changing its body. Therefore, they are all fallible. In the spiritual world, however, they are always liberated in oneness. Okay, verse 17. Uttama Purushastvanya Paramatmetyudahrataha yo lokatrayam avishya vivarti avyaya Ishvaraha. Besides these two, which is fallible and infallible, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them. The idea of this verse is very nicely expressed in the Katha Upanishad and Shvetashvatar Upanishad. It is clearly stated there that above the innumerable living entities, some of whom are conditioned, some of whom are liberated, there is the Supreme Person who is Paramatma. The Upanishadic verse runs as follows: Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetanana. The purport is that amongst all living entities, both conditioned and liberated, there is one supreme living personality, the Supreme Person of Godhead, who maintains them and gives them all the facility of enjoyment according to different work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. A wise man who can understand him is eligible to attain a perfect peace, not others. Verse 18. Yasmat charamati toham aksharaadapi chottamaha atosmi loke vedecha pratita purushottamaha. Because I am transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person. So this is Purushottama. No one can surpass the Supreme Person of Godhead Krishna, neither the conditioned soul nor the liberated soul. He is therefore the greatest of personalities. Purusha Uttama. So who can argue that he doesn't have a form? Now it is clear here that the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are individuals. The difference is that the living entities, either in the conditioned state or liberated state, cannot surpass in quantity the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is incorrect to think of the Supreme Lord and the living entities as being on the same level or equal in all respects. There is always the question of superiority and inferiority between their personalities. The word Uttama is very significant. No one can surpass the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Loke signifies in the Paurusha Agama, the Smriti scriptures, as confirmed in the Nirukti dictionary, Lokyate Vedartho Nena. The purpose of the Vedas is explained by the Smriti scriptures. The Supreme Lord in his localized aspect of Paramatma is also described in the Vedas themselves. The following verse appears in the Chandogya Upanishad, which means the super soul coming out of the body enters the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. The super soul coming out of the body enters the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Then in his form, he remains in his spiritual identity. That Supreme is called the Supreme Personality. So it's not clear here when the super soul is coming out and when he enters the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. It said whenever it comes out and it enters, then he remains in his form, in his spiritual identity, and he is the Supreme Personality, which means that the Paramatma is the Supreme Personality, quoted in the Vedas. This means that the Supreme Personality is exhibiting and diffusing his spiritual effulgence, which is the ultimate illumination. That Supreme Personality also has a localized aspect of Paramatma. By incarnating himself as the son of Satyavati and Parashara, he explains the Vedic knowledge as Vyasadeva. So it's all the Supreme Person who is present as Paramatma, who appears as Vyasadeva, etc. Yomam evam asammudho janati purushottamam sa sarva vidbhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, me, Krishna is now saying Mam, me, Krishna. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. So we know, if you accept Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we know everything. And what is the result of that knowing everything? He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. There are many philosophical speculations about the constitutional position of living entities in the Supreme Absolute Truth. Now in this verse, the Supreme Personality of Godhead clearly explains that anyone who knows Lord Krishna to be the Supreme Person is actually the knower of everything. So we should quote these verses for people who argue about Nirakar. But they will interpret it in their own way. The imperfect knower goes on simply speculating about the absolute truth, but the perfect knower, without wasting his valuable time, engages directly in Krishna consciousness. Throughout the whole of Bhagavad Gita, this fact is being stressed at every step. And still there are so many stubborn commentators in the Bhagavad Gita who consider the Supreme Absolute Truth and the living entities to be one and the same. Vedic knowledge is called Shruti, learning by oral reception. One should actually receive the Vedic message from authorities like Krishna and his representatives. Here Krishna distinguishes everything very nicely, and one should hear from this source. Distinguishes meaning he's saying I am different, then there is Paramatma, and then there is Jivatma, everything. Simply to hear like hogs is not sufficient. One must be able to understand from the authorities. It is not that one should simply speculate academically. One should submissively hear from Bhagavad Gita that these living entities are always subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who is able to understand this, according to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, knows the purpose of the Vedas. No one else knows the purpose of the Vedas. The word bhajati is very significant. In many places, the word bhajati is expressed in relationship with service of the Supreme Lord. If a person engaged in full Krishna consciousness in devotional service of the Lord, it is to be understood that he has understood all the Vedic knowledge. In the Vaishnava Parampara, it is said that if one is engaged in devotional service of Krishna, then there is no need for any other spiritual process for understanding the Supreme Absolute Truth. He has already come to the point because he is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. He has ended all preliminary processes of understanding. But if anyone, after speculating for hundreds of thousands of life, does not come to the point that Krishna is the Supreme Person of Godhead, and that one has to surrender there, all his speculation for so many years and lives is a useless waste of time. So we can understand how fortunate we are that without wasting our lives further, we already wasted for so many lifetimes, but without wasting our lives further, we have come to the perfect stage, or at least the perfect path. And if continue on the perfect path, we will come to the perfect stage also. So we should understand by these purports really our fortune. Verse 20. Iti guhyatamam shastram idam muktam maya nagha etad buddha buddhiman syat kritakrityascha bharata. So Krishna is saying this is guhyatamam shastram. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, whatever he is explained just now. O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection, because he is not going to waste his life. One who knows the Krishna's position and that one has to engage in full devotional service, he's come to the most confidential part of the Vedas. Purport. The Lord clearly explains here that this is the substance of all revealed scriptures, and one should understand this as it is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus one will become intelligent and perfect in transcendental knowledge. In other words, by understanding this philosophy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engaging in his transcendental service, everyone can become freed from all contamination of the modes of material nature. Devotional service is a process of spiritual understanding. Wherever devotional service exists, the material contamination cannot coexist. Devotional service to the Lord and the Lord himself are one and the same, because they are spiritual, meaning the Lord and his devotional service both are one and the same. They are spiritual. Devotional service takes place within the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. So this is also very important. Any devotional service that we do is internal energy. So we cannot think of devotional service as material. Just that the more conscious we are about this devotional service, the faster the progress will be. The Lord is said to be the sun, and ignorance is called darkness. Where the sun is present, there is no question of darkness. Therefore, whenever devotional service is present under the proper guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, there is no question of ignorance. Everyone must take to this consciousness of Krishna and engage in devotional service to become intelligent and purified. Unless one comes to this question of understanding Krishna and engages in devotional service, however intelligent he may be in the estimation of some common man, he is not perfectly intelligent. The word Anagha, by which Arjuna is addressed, is significant. Anagha, O sinless one, means that unless one is freed from all sinful reactions, it is very difficult to understand Krishna. One has to become free from all contamination, all sinful activities, then he can understand. So Prabhupada here is mentioning all contamination, sinful activities, as well as sinful reactions, everything. Only then we can understand Krishna as he is. Right now we have only incomplete understanding of Krishna. When we come to that stage, we will have a complete understanding of Krishna, because Krishna will reveal himself to us. But devotional service is so pure and potent that once one is engaged in devotional service, he automatically comes to the stage of sinlessness. Now, automatically doesn't mean that we don't have to make any effort at all. At least we should make sure that we are following our vows properly. Chanting, following four regulative principles, reading, at least these things we should do. Then automatically we will come. We don't have to do anything else. That's what automatically means. No other process is required. While one is performing devotional service in the association of pure devotees in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which require to be vanquished altogether. So this is very, very critical paragraph. The most important thing one has to surmount is weakness of the heart. The first fall down is caused by the desire to lord it over material nature. The first fall down, which means that is why we have come here. Thus one gives up the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord. The second weakness of the heart is that as one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature, he becomes attached to matter and the position of matter. This is where we are stuck in the second weakness, attached to material things. The problems of material existence are due to these weaknesses of heart. In this chapter, the first 5 verses describe the process of freeing oneself from these weaknesses of heart, and the rest of the chapter discuss Purushottama Yoga. So this weakness of heart, Prabhupada is saying that the first 5 verses are talking about how to get out of this weakness. So what are these first 5 verses? First verse talks about how this imperishable banyan tree, that that this world is a reflection, that this is not real, right? And third and fourth, also saying that one should cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So even if there is Hridaya Daurvalya, weakness of heart, we should give it up and we should cut it down by the weapon of detachment, and one should seek the Supreme Lord and surrender unto Him. And verse 5 says that, gives the process of surrender. So basically the answer is, what is the solution for this weakness of heart is to surrender to Krishna. If we fully surrender to Krishna, then we can overcome this weakness of heart, and thereby we will lose all attraction to this material world, and then proceed on the way back home, back to Godhead. Okay, so with this we end the 15th chapter, which is Purushottama Yoga. If anybody has any questions, kindly ask. Pretty straightforward purport, so nothing much I have to explain.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, tell me.
Prabhuji, as you said that Veda's main aim is to understand Krishna, right? So then why Vedas has been classified into three parts: Karma Kanda, Gyan Kand, Upasana Kand. I mean, level wise. Out of which Karma Kand is for material purpose and for material gains, right? So,
yeah. So see, basically Vedas, we should understand that Veda means all knowledge. Right now, when the Lord has created this material world, then there are different types of people also in this material world. And we cannot create knowledge only for the PhD, no? When textbooks are written, they have to first also write for KG1, first standard, second standard, gradually then PhD. Now, somebody who is at KG1 level can't be given PhD textbook. So those who want to engage in Karmakanda, they are in that KG1 level. Then slowly they will come up, progress, they'll come to Gnanakanda, they'll understand, oh, this Karmakanda is also all useless. Then they do Gnana, Naiti, trying search, where is who's the supreme. Finally they come to, oh, Upasana. So we have to worship. So this is gradual progression. And even in Upasana, initially there will be worship of higher powers. We are demigods. And then mode of ignorance, demigod worship, mode of passion, demigod worship, mode of goodness, demigod worship. And finally, Jiva comes to Vishnu or Krishna. So this is a long path. Right now, everybody cannot directly come to this stage, and they will have to go. And this is true for every Jiva. It's not that we are any exceptions. Of course, right now there could be lots of exceptions because of the Suvarna Yuga, golden period, and because the devotees' mercy, people might have skipped some of these processes, and they might have got some shortcut paths. But otherwise, every Jiva goes through this. And they have their own timeline to come to Vishnu or Krishna. So Krishna has to provide knowledge for everybody. So Vedas has everything. But the point is that it is all hidden. It's not directly understandable, right? We are so easily summarizing this like this because Prabhupada has told us. He's a seer of truth, right? So he's telling, so we understand this. But otherwise, somebody who's engaged in reading the billion verses of Vedas, they cannot come to this summary conclusion so easily. They'll struggle.
yeah, Prabhu. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Ram Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. One right I have. Like Prabhuji, one of the verses we read that super soul diffuses into the impersonal Brahman. In this chapter we read. So, Prabhuji, is it right to understand that at the time of death, when one leaves the body, the soul is carried to, the soul is carried by the subtle body to another body, and the super soul goes and merges with impersonal Brahman.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to, that's why I said it's that particular verse is not very clearly from Chandogya Upanishad, it's not very clearly saying when this is happening, because see, when the Atma leaves the body, it is carried by the subtle body. When it leaves the gross body, it is carried by the subtle body. Now, when it is carried by the subtle body, if there's it's already time for it to enter another body, then it has to enter, and then Paramatma also has to enter, right? But this may be during the time of partial dissolution, when the Atma will go and rest in Supreme Lord, in Mahavishnu. When the Jivatma goes and resides in Mahavishnu, at that time Paramatma doesn't have any work to do, so he merges into personal Brahman. But when the Jivatma has to get into action, again Paramatma has to become present, right? So technically, I don't know, while logically this is what it looks like, but I have not studied this further to say when this happens.
These are complicated. Like, Prabhuji, is it like when a person leaves the body, the next body is immediately ready, or he has to like reach?
No. Immediate. Actually, the Jivatma leaves the present body only after the next body is already predetermined. So, and he has to immediately enter unless there is punishment and he has to go to Yamaloka. Now, if he has to go to Yamaloka, there still is a semblance of a material body, meaning one can experience the pain, but one will not die. That kind of a body is given to him. So now, but I don't know technically whether at that time Paramatma is there or not. But if there is no Naraka situation for a Jivatma, then he will immediately enter another mother's womb, and in which case Paramatma has to enter. See, these are all a lot of technicalities, because see, when the Jivatma is there in the womb of the mother up to 7 months, he doesn't have consciousness. Now, I don't know whether during that time whether Paramatma's presence is required or not required, right? So, I mean, these are technicalities we can speculate, but I've not studied these things so deeply, so I don't want to speculate.
Prabhuji, one more thing, I read like in Bhagavatam, there are two living entities, eternally conditioned and eternally liberated. Eternally liberated, so we understand. So Prabhuji, eternally conditioned, we fall under that category only, and like how do we like understand? Like we were eternally conditioned, like we were never at one point of time with Krishna.
No. Okay, so Nitya Pada Prabhupada has explained. Nitya word is used because it's long time. It's so long that we don't even know when we fell. So that way it is eternal. It's like, without knowing when it happened, and hence the word Nitya is used. Because if we are Nitya Baddha, then it means that even in the future we'll remain Baddha, which means that we don't have any hopes of getting liberated at all.
That's what I was thinking. We are eternally conditioned, and so we don't have any hope of getting.
Yeah, we just don't know when we became conditioned. That's all that it means.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else has any questions? So we are finished. 15. Yeah, not true.
So in this purport, actually, cause of fall down, like Prabhupada explained, desire to lording over first, and second is attachment. But in many other like other places, causes like desire to lording over and enjoying propensity independent of Krishna. So here, actually, enjoying propensity is connected with second attachment to matter. So
enjoying. I mean, why did we want to lord it over material nature? Because we want to enjoy. All of these are connected. It's not like, I mean, that we wanted to lord it over material nature, that desire we had. So we had to come here. And then once we have come here, if we don't get attached to matter, then why did we fall down? So that is why during creation first, actually, avidya is created. Brahma creates avidya. Brahma creates false ego. Bhagavatam says that he creates all those ingredients by which we will get attached to this material world and things of this material world. And then we continue to lord over, because that is that false ego. False ego actually means that I am separate from Krishna. I have no connection with Krishna. That is false ego. Right? And so, yeah, it is the same. It's literally the same, just put in different way. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Yeah. So I was just saying we finished 15 chapters. So 16, 17, 18 will also be very fast because it's just jnana. There is not much to be explained unless somebody has any real deep questions, which I don't even know whether I will have knowledge to answer. But we'll possibly go through these quickly. And the idea is suppose that I want to start Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam, we will not be doing reading because many devotees might not have read and understood Bhagavatam so deeply. So first we'll expect all the devotees to read purports by themselves. And my focus is to explain some of the key aspects in the purports and verses. So whenever Krishna willing, we'll come to that. But just, that will be more like a class format and not reading session format. So I'm just letting all of you know. So we will finish this reading with, Bhagavad Gita, and then we'll go into, but we'll still do half an hour only. But it'll be more like a class. Okay. So I think already 9:17. Okay, we'll close here. So Friday anyway, we will not have session because of the most awaited festival of the year. So let's hope and pray that all of us can get nicely engaged on the day of Krishna's appearance and for all coming time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.